On our newscast tonight, Chuseok, arguably the most hotly anticipated Korean holiday, is right around the corner, and the roads are packed with early birds trying to get a jump on the holiday traffic. We hit the road to give you an update. Rival political parties failed to see eye to eye on an array of topics, and they've been at loggerheads for over a month now. President Park demands that the main opposition Democratic Party stop taking to the streets in protest and return for talks. A former sailor discharged from service for misconduct, dressed in uniform, goes on a shooting rampage in Washington, killing at least a dozen people. His motive is unknown as of now, but experts rule out the possibility of terrorism. For these stories and more, stay with us.
It is 5 a.m. in Washington, noon in Damascus, and 6 on a Tuesday evening here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Moon Gon-young.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us. One of the biggest holidays of Korea is around the corner. You don't need to check your calendar. The traffic says it all.
Right, Chuseok, Korea's fall harvest holiday starts on Wednesday, that is tomorrow this year. It's a time when Koreans head home to see families and pay their respects to their ancestors. So if you're in Korea and you have family to see, you're probably getting anxious to get out of town for the long holiday weekend.
Some people have already gotten an early start, and the highways are starting to get packed up. To see how the roads are looking this Tuesday evening, we have our Song Ji-sun standing by at Seoul's toll gate, where thousands of people are already taking part in the mass exodus. So, Ji-sun, how are things looking at this hour?
Well, Daniel, Gon-young, good evening, guys. You know, the highways start to get packed from noon this afternoon. And as you can see behind me, more cars are hitting the road as people get off from work and head to their hometowns. Now, the Korea Express Corporation says 430,000 cars are expected to exit Seoul on this Tuesday, and more than half of them had already left the capital by 3 p.m. And the estimated travel time from Seoul to Busan is about 7 hours for people leaving now. Now, keep in mind that the driving time from Seoul to Busan is usually 4.5 to 5 hours drive. And the traffic is expected to get heavier in the morning tomorrow, reaching its peak at noon. Korea Express predicts it could take up to 9.5 hours to get from Seoul to Busan tomorrow, which is the first day most people will have off for the holiday. The traffic will start to let up heading into Wednesday evening, so if you do not want to spend too much time on the road, you might want to leave late Wednesday afternoon.
Ji-sun, this traffic congestion is really something that we haven't seen before. I mean, you know, every Chuseok or Seollal, Korean New Year's holidays, we see this traffic congestion. But is the condition worse this Chuseok season than in the past?
You know that traffic will be the highest, and the most people on record will be traveling during this year's Chuseok holiday season. Now, a record 35 million people are expected to travel during this year's Chuseok holiday season, with an average of 5.8 million people moving a day. And now, of course, the most people are expected to travel on Thursday, the day of Chuseok, with 7.3 million people expected to be on the road, and roads will likely be packed with people traveling back to their homes after they complete their traditional memorial services in the morning. And the traffic won't be as bad for people heading back to the capital after the holiday, as people are expected to head back to Seoul on different days leading into the weekend. Authorities advise the public to stay alert during the long hours of driving, as there are usually more traffic accidents during the holiday, whether because of drowsy drivers or people driving while drunk. To avoid the highly congested roads, make use of your smartphone applications and use alternate routes when possible to avoid the traffic. I'll be back with more latest updates in our later newscast. Back to you.
All right, thank you for that, Ji-sun. That was our Song Ji-sun reporting live from the very busy, very noisy Seoul toll gate on Gyeongbu Highway.
All right, and it's not just the nation's expressways that are seeing traffic build up. Koreans are also taking the bus and trains to get to their hometowns.
Right, so for that and for the weather conditions under which Koreans will be traveling in, let's go over to our Michelle Park standing by at the Weather Center.
Michelle, we are now just hours away from the start of the Chuseok holiday and the traffic is already building up on the roads.
Yes, and because we are having a traffic, we can expect more people and the station really packed.
Right, those are the bus and train stations, right?
Right. And I would guess that most people have already booked their tickets by now, right, Michelle?
But for those of you who didn't yet, you can check online at KoRail or KoBus. And now those of you who were wondering about the weather conditions throughout the Chuseok holiday, we are mainly going to have clear skies with hot daytime temperature as well. Taking you over to more details. Seoul will start off the morning at 17 and 32 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will also peak at 30 and 29 degrees. Down onto Jeju Island, we'll see perfect autumn sky. And meanwhile, Dokdo and Manggyeong should peak at 26 and 18 degrees. Well, that's all I have for you today, and back to you guys.
The National Intelligence Service have raided the homes of 5 left-wing political activists on charges of conspiracy to topple the government and of violating the country's national security law. Officials say from early Tuesday morning, NIS agents stormed the residences and offices of activists, including Hong Sung-kyu, the spokesperson of minor left-wing Unified Progressive Party, and suspicions they have links to the so-called revolutionary organization.
Members of RO were allegedly plotting to sabotage the South Korean government and U.S. troops in the event of an inter-Korean war. Meanwhile, UPP lawmaker Lee Seok-gi, who has been detained on the same charges, is reportedly exercising his right to remain silent during questioning by the prosecution.
Now, President Park Geun-hye had hoped to break the prolonged political gridlock at the National Assembly through talks with the leaders of the 2 main political parties on Monday.
But the main opposition party came out of the meeting clearly unsatisfied, and in return, the president has expressed displeasure. Our Kim Hyun-ji reports.
It looks like business at the National Assembly will stay on hold for a while, after a highly anticipated meeting between the president and rival parties failed to produce an agreement on how to end an impasse that's dragged on for more than a month. After the meeting, the Democratic Party said it would continue a street campaign it started over a month ago to protest the spy agency's alleged meddling in last year's presidential election. The campaign has effectively stalled parliamentary business, which means that a string of important livelihood bills, including a government tax revision plan and next year's budget, as well as measures to boost the real estate market, are still hanging in the balance. President Park on Tuesday slammed the opposition party for its decision to continue with its street protests.
야당에서 장외투쟁을 고집하면서 민생을 외면한다면 국민적인 저항에 부딪힐 것입니다. 그리고 그 책임 또한 야당이 져야 할 것입니다.
Democratic Party leader Kim Han-gil fired back with criticism of his own.
President Park has proven incompetent in looking after people's livelihoods. She's ignored democracy. That's why people's lives are fraught with difficulties today. She bears the biggest responsibility for the hard lives of the people.
The president's message was echoed by the ruling Saenuri Party, which has called on the opposition party to take the tents down and return to parliament.
I politely asked the Democratic Party to rethink its controversial stance, which I did not see coming, and help us resume parliamentary business to work on livelihood issues.
Political analyst Lee Chul-hee told Arirang TV Tuesday that the gap between President Park and the ruling party on one side and the Democratic Party on the other is great, and that it is impossible to project at this point when and how the situation will be resolved. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
So it doesn't look like we'll be seeing the political deadlock at the National Assembly resolved anytime in the near future.
For some perspective and prospects for Korean politics, we're now joined live in the studio by Dr. Hong Sung-pil, professor at Seoul-based Yonsei Law School. Dr. Hong, welcome back to the program.
It's a great pleasure to be here again.
Firstly, Professor Hong, you just saw the president's reaction and the main opposition party leader's response to that and the ruling party's position. Your thoughts?
Well, it seems apparent that both parties and the presidential office itself had no clear positive objectives and purposes for this meeting. I mean, it's apparent from the atmosphere and the way they looked when they worked out of the conference. So, I mean, Hwang Woo and President Park, they talked together, but Kim Han-gil, the leader of the UP, the DP, actually stood a little bit aloof from them. So, I mean, that showed sort of disagreement rather than agreement that has been made in the meeting, I think.
Could we talk a little bit about the responses that came out following that meeting?
I think the majority party actually says the president's office and President Park showed all the efforts to actually launch new politics and showed everything to the public and to the minority party transparently. But the Kim Han-gil and the minority party says nothing had been talked. So I think there's a clear divide of opinion as to the result of the meeting itself, and then that's obvious from the look, actually, the conference itself. Yeah.
Right, and nothing fruitful so far. So obviously, in yesterday's National Assembly meeting did not go too well. That's one thing we know for certain. But could you fill us in on what possibly could have gone back and forth in the conversations between the president and the two rival parties?
I think it's, I mean, they could have talked and they could have worked more on toward the normalization of the Korean politics. But a lot of things happened in chain reaction. The incident of the prosecutor's office's chief, Chaz, and also Lee Seok-gi and also Tong Jin-dang incident as well. So these things made a block, I think a political block, that would prohibit these people from making a very tangible results out of this conference.
Right, a lot of sensational headliners. It provides us with a lot to talk about, but a lot less for them to discuss about. It makes it a little bit more sensitive and touchy for them to cover a range of topics at the moment.
So, Professor, you were saying that the resignation of, or tendering a resignation of the Prosecutor General, Choi Dong-wook, as well as the Unified Progressive Party's leader, or not a leader, member of that party, Lee Seok-gi situation was discussed during the talks, yes?
Exactly. Two things were mainly discussed, I think. First was the National Intelligence Service, how to deal with the proposed reform of National Intelligence Service. And President Park and the majority party say it should be at the hands of the National Intelligence Service itself, and then the National Assembly will get in for review. And I think that is the principle. But the minority party says, there has to be a very profound reform, and it should be made by the hands of a special committee, made by either National Assembly or else. And secondly, Mr. Choi, the chief of the prosecutor's office incident, nobody's sure whether he really has a child and out of wedlock. But the issue is here, I mean, it has been too politicized. And minority party says, I mean, the Changwon and the Blue House and the majority party, so all NIS are all behind to exert pressure to make him resign from his office out of just personal rumor. But it has to be seen, and then whether the truth itself will get rebuilt in the final stage, or these sort of political events will just continue and will continue to confuse the people's mind even after the Chuseok.
And, President Park Geun-hye was clearly not pleased with the result or the outcome of that meeting, and she expressed her voice clearly earlier today. Now, in essence, what would you say was the key issue that actually broke down the talks?
First, atmosphere. First, I think it's a season of taming. I mean, either the majority party or the minority party should have initiative in the coming re-elections, in the coming local elections in the next year. And so this is a time to tame each other and to get more portion out of the political initiative. So I think that's the first key. And second, it's a political season. I mean, we have now a regular session of the National Assembly in session, and then also other political events are coming in. But there's one unintended chain of events here. The NLL statement, the loss of that presidential record, and then the proposed involvement of NIS in the internal political affairs, and also the Isaki and the Tongzhendang incident, and the prosecutor's chief, Mr. Che's incident as well. So these things have been all combined to work as a sort of a factor that casts very unpredictable events of the day.
Okay, you mentioned the word tame, and I guess it could be used in a number of situations and people, including DP leader Kim Han-gil. Apparently, there could have been some opposition internally. So it's a matter of tame or be tamed. And it could have been a litmus test, a three-way talk on his competence or his leadership skills. So where does he stand right now? Where does his party stand right now?
Personally, I think he's in trouble. It's not just his trouble, it's the trouble of the minority party. I mean, it's almost impossible to get sort of leadership of full-fledged initiative in the current formation of minority party structure, because people are divided by political factions, and then also the people with hard voice and strong voices, usually they get the mic. So Kim Han-gil is really hard to, he would be really hard to make any kind of personal, right decisions at this moment, but the pressure is on him. So I think my personal expectation is that he cannot retreat from this current position because he has to mobilize and muster his own political power among his politics. So it's hard to predict what will really happen in positive light.
Of course, at this point, the ruling Saenmi Party leader Hwang Woo-yeol isn't free of pressure either, of course, especially with a stockpile of bills related to the livelihoods of the Korean people pending at the National Assembly. Now, what are your short and long-term forecasts of Korean politics?
Well, the time is not on the side of minority parties. They are now in the streets for more than about
the main opposition party.
Yeah, opposition party. Sorry. For 50 days now, they have been in the streets. I mean, they have now lost the cause for returning back to the National Assembly with good appearance. But at the end of the day, people will hold the majority party and the current administration for what is happening in the political stage. And well, the economy and welfare and North Korean threats. So all other things are the primary issues and priority issues in this country. So if this sort of political deadlock continues, and that would undermine or hurt the resolving those problems, I think people will eventually hold the majority party responsible for what is happening right now.
I see. Well, Dr. Hong Sang-pil, professor of Yonsei Law School, thank you so much for making time for us today.
It's my pleasure.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with heroes and experts to help you understand the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gun-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Now, shifting gears to the economy, Korean import prices rose by... Now, of course, most of us here in Korea are excited about the upcoming harvest holiday, but this Chuseok season around, there are those who are probably more happy and nervous than others about meeting their family.
That's right, and they are those who have family on the other side of the Korean border. Around 100 separated family members from the south will be making a trip to the north next week for a first round of family reunions.
Ahead of that meeting, Arirang News Foreign Affairs correspondent Hwang Sang-hee met with one woman who has been waiting for decades to see her loved ones face to face.
좋은 명절 보내세요. 네, 안녕하세요. 감사합니다.
For 86-year-old Heo Kyung-ok, Chuseok, or Korean Thanksgiving holiday, was just another busy day at work, not an occasion for family gatherings. She has been separated from her family for more than 60 years, since leaving her hometown of Kaesong in North Korea for what was supposed to be a short trip to the south.
I didn't know that Kaesong would be blocked. I thought I would return soon. I left in spring and I thought I would be back by fall, but it's taken this long.
This Chuseok, Kyung-ok is all smiles as she awaits to reunite with her sisters next week after 6 decades of separation. She is one of the lucky 96 divided family members from the south that will travel to North Korea's Mount Kumgang next Wednesday for the first round of family reunions. Millions of Koreans were separated from their families during the Korean War in the 1950s, and time is running out for them to see each other again. Nearly 80% of the participants from both Koreas selected for next week's meeting are over the age of 80. There are still more than 70,000 separated family members in the south, like Gyeongok, waiting to be reunited with their loved ones someday. But for those attending the reunion, 3 days will not be enough to catch up for the 60 years they were separated.
How they have been, how they have lived. I want to know all these things, how their lives have been.
황성희, Arirang News.
Korea is set to soon announce the winner of a multi-billion-dollar contract to supply 60 fighter jets to the Air Force. The Defense Acquisition Program Administration said it will announce its decision next Tuesday after a final assessment. Boeing's F-15 Silent Eagle is the sole candidate after the other two leading candidates, the EADS Eurofighter Tranche 3 Typhoon and Lockheed Martin's F-35, were removed because they would have exceeded the budget of 8.3 trillion won, roughly $7.7 billion. More than a dozen people were killed after a gunman opened fire at a U.S. Navy installation in Washington, D.C. on Monday. The gunman is among the dead. Our Kim Ji-yeon has the latest.
The gunman who killed at least 12 people on Monday morning at a U.S. Naval office in Washington, D.C. was identified as former U.S. Navy serviceman and sailor Aaron Alexis. The 34-year-old shooter who died during the rampage was discharged from service for misconduct after serving in the Naval Reserves for 4 years from 2007 to 2011. Local media reports say that Alexis had run-ins with the law in the past. In 2004, he was arrested for shooting the car tires of a civilian, and in 2010 was questioned by authorities for firing his gun while in an apartment building. Alexis said it was an accidental discharge at the time.
And as he came around the corner, he aimed his gun at us, and he fired at least 2 or 3 shots. And we ran down the stairs to get out of the building.
The rampage took place less than 6 kilometers from the White House and 1 kilometer from the Capitol. The Pentagon and other public buildings have strengthened security, while departures were suspended at the Reagan National Airport. Workers at the Navy installation were also ordered to evacuate, and nearby schools were closed temporarily. Meanwhile, U.S. President Barack Obama offered his condolences to the victims and called the shootings a cowardly act.
Investigation moves forward, we will do everything in our power to make sure whoever carried out this cowardly act is held responsible.
The motive for the attack is not yet known, but so far officials say that there's no indication it was an act of terrorism. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories, more than 1.3 million foreign travelers visited Korea last month, a new record high. The Korea Culture and Tourism Institute says the August total was up some 23% compared to the same month last year. Nearly half of the foreign travelers were from China, topping the list by nationality, followed by Japanese tourists who made up nearly 20% of total visitors. However, the weak yen actually prompted the number of Japanese tourists in August to drop 22% year on year. The number of Chinese tourists increased by some 78%. Investors from all over the world will have their eyes fixed firmly on Washington for the next 2 days, where the U.S. Federal Reserve is widely expected to decide on when and by how much it will dial back its bond purchases. An announcement by the Federal Open Market Committee on a potential tapering of quantitative easing and future key interest rates is expected Wednesday. U.S. stocks and bonds rallied in Asia on hopes that Chairman Ben Bernanke's eventual successor will gradually wind down the Fed's monetary policies rather than do so abruptly. And here is how the markets closed in Korea on this Tuesday, the last trading day before a 3-day market holiday followed by the weekend. And that's all from us for this hour. Thank you for watching. This has been Daniel Chen.
And I'm Moon Gun-young. Thank you as always for being here with us. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Good night.